Hello and welcome to the sewing studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make this gorgeous little table runner. This is really quick and easy to make. It measures 12 inches by 28 inches and for it you'll need a mini charm, and I've chosen this one. It's called Winterly by Robin Pickens, and you will also need 1/2 metre of fabric as your background fabric. And then you'll need a long quarter for your binding. So I'm going to show you how to make this really quick and simple little project. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut ourselves some 4.5 inch squares. So if you take the width of your fabric, keep it folded because it's quicker this way, and so we're going to cut it at 4.5 inches. And we need to do that 3 times in total. So I'm just going to subcut that across now. Get rid of the selvage. And then I'm just going to subcut 4.5. Because I cut that while it was still folded, I've cut through 2 pieces at a time. So I'm just going to make this one into a 4.5 inch. There we are. So the next thing we're going to do, and this is always my favourite bit, is I'm going to open the mini charm. Isn't that just gorgeous? Usually I like to save them, but today after this I'm going to open it. And what you need to do is you need to pair them up into lights and darks. So if you look at the one that I've made, you'll see that we've got a lighter fabric against a darker fabric. So we need a bit of contrast. So I'm going to line them up. So there's a dark one. I'm going to put a dark and a light together. And I'm going to do this a few times. So now I've sorted my mini charms into lights and darks. I'm going to give you a little tip now. Because we're going to make our flying geese, we want nice pointy bits here at the end. What we don't want is rounded ends. So I'm going to give you a little tip. So a nice small ruler works best for this because we're dealing with small pieces. And I love this little Creative Grids ruler, which is a 3.5 inch square, and it's perfect for small projects. But all I want to do is I want to mark 1/4 inch. So it's 1/4 inch in from that side and 1/4 inch in from that side, because I want it to be exact. When I'm doing my machining, I need to stop with my needle in and turn it so I get an absolute perfect point. So I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to mark on here. So I've gone in 1/4 inch here and I've come up 1/4 inch from the bottom. So I'm just putting a pen mark there. So what I tend to do is I tend to sort of go along to the end so I can actually see it on the machine, and you're not going to see this when we do the sewing. So I would do that with all of these. So I'll just show you that again. So you're putting your 1/4 inch line here. You've got 1/4 inch line from the bottom, and that is where our needle needs to go. And I tend to sit at the machine and do it as I go. The other thing is you may have a sewing machine that's got a mark on the foot. And if you've got that, if you've got a 1/4 inch guide and you've got a 1/4 inch mark on the foot, you'll be able to get that spot on. But if you haven't, that's a nice little top tip, and I'm going to show you that, how that's going to work on the machine now. So we're just going over to the sewing machine. So I'm going to now machine down 1/4 inch, and I'm going to stop with my needle in the mark that I made earlier on. And then I'm going to lift the presser foot and turn the square, and I'm going to sew down the other side. So you would do this with all of your squares. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to chain piece a few of them together. And on my machine, I've got 1/4 inch guide, which is just there. So I can use this without having to mark up anymore. So once you've sewn all of your 21 pairs of squares together, the next thing we're going to do, because we want a nice point here at the end, where we've come around, let's get one where it's not on white. So where we've come along with our sewing machine and we've come along, we've got this nice perfect rectangle here. What we're going to do very carefully is you're going to snip as near to your sewing as possible, being very careful that you don't snip into your sewing. And then you're going to cut at the side to trim the bulk away, because if you just cut across the corner, you've still got a lot of bulk. So you can see there that I've sort of cut almost an arrow shape. And then if we turn this through, what we need to do is we need to go to the iron, but again, I want to show you on this camera that we're going to push our seams aside so that we can butt these two seams together going opposite ways, and then we're going to press this so you can see that we've got a nice point at the end. So I'll just go to the iron, show you how to do that. So I'm just going to line that up and just finger press it carefully, and then with the heat of the iron, and there you can see that we've got a nice point to our flying geese. So we're going to do that with all of them, and then we're going to sandwich them between our background fabric. So I'll just do a few more of these. I can show you again. So very carefully cut as near to your stitching as you can. Trim it back. Let's turn it that way actually. Trim it back. And if you get rid of all that bulk of the fabric, that's what helps you to have a nice point. The other thing you can do is if you want to just push the end out very carefully. So I've just got a blunt pencil there and I'm just carefully pushing into that corner to get as good a point as I possibly can. Being really careful that you don't poke your pencil through the stitches. So the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to set our points into our background fabric. So I've used a grunge fabric here, and I think this is grunge white paper, this one's called. So carefully making sure I've got it the right way round, because it's easy to use the wrong side. What I'm going to do is to make sure that I'm getting my point into the centre. What I do is I fold the fabric in half and just finger press so I've got a little line there to work to. And then I take one of my flying geese and that centre seam I put over the little line. I'm just going to pop a pin in there. Just pin that in place, just to hold it there. And then I'm going to take another piece of background fabric and I'm going to sandwich that over the top. I'm going to carefully hold it, pinch it in the middle, take my pin out, and then I can pin again on the outside. So I've sandwiched that nice and securely. And then I'm going to do that because what we need to do is we need to have 7 going one way and then we've got 7 going the other way. And that's all about how you press your seam will determine which way your arrows are going. So I would recommend when you're doing this at home to lay them all out rather than make lots of sandwiches. I would lay them all out so you can see you've got a good spread of colour. So if I'm going to say do this row with this one, I would start laying them like this and I'd probably go light and dark, and then on the next one I'd go dark and light, and then this one they're sort of both fairly dark but I've got a contrast of colour, so I wouldn't want another red on this side, so I'd perhaps have the red there and the green there. So I'd encourage you to lay all 21 out first so you get a good spread of colour. Then you sandwich them together. So I'll do this and then I'll show you how the pressing works. So I'm just going over to the machine and I'm going to join this together. But before I do that, if you like what we do, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you leave us a comment, we'll always get back to you. So I'm just very carefully going to ease the pin backwards. I don't want to take it out completely, but I also don't want my needle going over it and breaking it, because if I take it out completely, I don't want to move this, because it is important that it is in the centre of your squares. So you can see how I've sandwiched this together. Now, if I was doing the other ones, I'd put the next one like this. I'd fold it, put my crease, as I showed you before. I'd put my next one like this and like this. But I'm just going to show you, depending on which way you want your geese to fly, is how you press it. So if I want my geese going that way, I'm going to press it with my seam going the other way. So I'm just going to the iron. I'm going to set the seam. And then I'm going to lift the top and flip that back. So that determines which way I want it to go. If I wanted it to go the other way, I would flip the top back and it would go the other way. So you would just join them up. You would do 3 rows. So one row going to your right, one row going to your left, and your other one going back to your right. And it's that easy. And when you come to join your 3 rows, because they're going opposite ways, the great thing is these seams will all match up because you've already pressed them in the right direction. So let's just come back to this one. So once it all went together, so I've just got some white background fabric and I've got wadding in between. I've used this plain dark red for my binding. But what I did with quilting, because I've got this 3D effect, I was like, what am I going to do about quilting it? I didn't want to go over my seams because I would flatten the flying geese. So I have literally mirrored the zigzag. And I did that straight stitch quilting with my walking foot, and I extended the stitch length from 2.5 to 3. And I just followed the line and quilted it all the way up. So it's a really lovely, quick, easy little project. If you wanted a gift for somebody or you wanted to make it quickly for your Christmas table, how gorgeous is that? And we've got lots of Christmassy mini charms for you to choose from. So I hope I've inspired you. As always, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you next time here in the sewing studio.